Welcome! In this video, we'll learn more about Slicex. Slicex is a sampler plugin that can slice audio files into pieces and play them individually from the piano roll. If the WAV file contains slice or region data, this will be used. Otherwise, you can choose to automatically slice your audio files in a number of ways. You can play back, reorder, pitch shift, and stretch slices to your liking. A lot of Slicex's power stems from the fact that it borrows its wave editor from Edison, our audio editing plugin that can record, equalize, denoise and declip, add volume envelopes, and many more things. This section of the interface even looks like Edison, doesn't it? If you'd like to know more about the special tools and functions available here, check out our 6-part Edison video series where we go into everything that's available from these menus. Also, make sure you enable keyboard focus in the plugin title bar in order for the keyboard shortcuts to work in Slicex. This will steal the spacebar input for play and stop, so you probably don't want it on all the time. Okay, let's focus on the things that make Slicex itself special. You don't have all day, I don't have all day. We'll start by loading a drum loop. Normally, Slicex will auto-slice samples on load, but when using commercial drum loops, you will often encounter ones that have one marker saved at the start of the loop, just like the one I'm dragging in here. You can see there aren't any proper markers in the audio yet. We can only play the whole sample on C5. So let's add some. Click the Regions menu and choose one of the auto slicing options. Alternatively, use the Auto Slice toolbar button. Medium typically has the best results. See how the markers have been created at the start of drum hits? This method detects transients. Transients are sections of an audio file with a very large level difference, usually denoting the start of a sound or an important change in a sound. Looks like it missed these hits. No worries. We can add them manually too. Click and drag to make a selection. Press M on your keyboard to add a new marker at the left edge of the selection. Now, press the up arrow to deselect and select the next one. And here we are, manual markers added. You can also auto-slice in grid size increments based on the tempo information contained in the file. You'll notice that I've auto-dump selected here. This means that whenever I make a change to the marker positions, Slicex will automatically dump the slices as notes in the piano roll so that when unedited, the notes will trigger the original slices in the same order and timing. Let's make a change to the notes here. Let's move a marker, and back it goes. Auto dump is on by default, and when you load samples with tempo information or slice information like this one, Slicex creates the notes in the pattern you're editing, and you can immediately hear the sliced samples from the piano roll. Turn this off if you already have a groove going and want to edit marker positions without your piano roll notes being overwritten. Or if you want to replace the audio in regions in your loop with something from the browser perhaps. Yes, you can do that too. Drag and drop sounds onto regions like this. The region you'll be replacing is highlit in red. Release the mouse button to bring up the drum replacer tool. This will let you pitch shift sounds and fill gaps. You can also choose to discard the added tail from stretching, which will cut the stretched sample off at its original endpoint, allowing for some neat trickery. While I've got you looking up here, you can change the view layout of Slicex here. Click this to show and hide the testing keyboard. Notes that are assigned to slices are pink. This is the default view of Slicex, showing you both decks. Yes, Slicex has 2 decks. The standard first note color in the piano roll controls notes in deck A, and the second note color will control deck B. Notes will not auto-dump from deck B. Those have to be manually dumped from the menu here, or the Dump to Piano Roll button while deck B is selected. This view will hide the transport controls and editor toolbar. This view also hides the articulator and region settings. This final view only shows the master section. If you actually use Slicex like this, please don't tell anyone, for your own safety. From FL Studio 21.1, you can also resize Slicex by dragging the bottom right corner of the interface. Back to the default view. Notice piano roll notes carry the marker names. When you rename a marker by right-clicking it, the note will reflect this change. This makes it easier to keep track of sounds contained inside Slicex. To play regions to end, similar to Fruity Slicer, you'll need to run a script. Click here, select Run Script, Regions, Play to End. Now all slices will play to end instead of stopping at the next marker. This panel controls envelopes, filtering, mixer track output routing, sample start, playback speed, and other modulation effects you can apply to the regions. Each region has a number of parameters under the control of 8 sets of envelopes. Select which region you're editing here, or double-click its marker in the waveform to select a region. Right-click the Out control to send the slice to a specific mixer track. After you select one, you'll see a number here. The value is an offset to Slicex's mixer track. Or click and drag up and down to select an offset directly. Negative numbers are offset to the left. Positive numbers will offset the audio to the right. The cut group controls how one slice will play in the presence of another. Any region that is playing will be silenced by any subsequent region triggered in the same cut group. Think of this as making specific regions monophonic. You can link amp, filter, speed and start to every one of the 8 articulators here per region, so you can have a different volume envelope on hi-hats versus kick and snare. Articulators also include the filter here, so there are 8 parallel filters. The filter can be a low pass, band stop or high pass with 12, 24 and 36 dB per octave slopes. Adjust the frequency and resonance here. The envelope knob scales the effect of all cutoff modulators. There are 2 rows of tabs. The top row is used to select a target parameter to be modulated, and the bottom row is for the modulation source, the thing doing the modulating. You will see this system used in many of our plugins. You can modulate panning, volume, cutoff, resonance, playback speed, and sample start here. Every parameter that has active modulation will show a yellow line next to it. For every target parameter in the top row, you can choose a range of modulators and set how they will influence it. The modulator can be an envelope, LFO, note velocity, mod X and Y macros, or a random offset value. Right-click anywhere to add points to the envelope. Right-click and select Delete to delete points. Shift right-click to add a point that is exactly on the vertical position of the existing graph. Right-click tension handles to reset them. Select multiple points by drawing a box with Ctrl, Shift and click. There are additional envelope options in the envelope menu, but to keep this simple, we'll skip them here. You can right-click a control point to set control point types in the graphic envelope editor. Once all control points have been defined, the ADSR knobs act as multipliers for each section. Attack defines the length of the envelope section before the decay breakpoint. Decay scales the segment between the decay breakpoint and the sustain breakpoint. Sustain scales the decay segment vertically. Release scales the segment after the sustain breakpoint. Tempo lets you determine whether the envelope length is relative to the project tempo or absolute in time. When adjusting ADSR properties, the display will preview the effect of the knob value on the envelope shape. Once the mouse key is released, the envelope is restored to its previous view. This allows you to set a basic envelope shape and modify it quickly. The disadvantage is the current envelope played may not match exactly what you see. Just be aware of this. Alternatively, you're free to hand draw the entire envelope. Compared to Edison, the Slicex Wave Editor has new icons highlighting tools that are designed to work specifically with drum samples. For example, the drum loop time stretch function here. This opens a tool that can destructively time stretch the audio file in the Wave Editor. This interface should be familiar from the drum replacer tool we showed earlier. If you discard the tails here, the stretching is per slice, so every individual slice gets stretched and cut off at its original endpoint, meaning the loop's BPM does not change, but every individual region will be stretched. When you're dragging in a sample that has no tempo information in its metadata, but the BPM is known to you, or a sample that has the wrong BPM saved in its metadata, you can right-click here to bring up the Sample Properties dialog. Here you can enter the correct BPM or length in beats. Then the grid size slicing options will work as expected. If you've made a selection in the waveform and know exactly how long it is in beats, enter that number and the BPM will automatically be derived from that. If your sample has a known BPM, but isn't a perfect loop such that the grid doesn't line up with it, you can add a downbeat marker by using right shift and clicking anywhere in the wave. This will cause the grid start to follow that marker, notice the 1 here. Then keep right shift held and click again to adjust the grid to the timing of your sample. When you have your sample sliced, you can access a couple of batch functions that will make life easier. For example, in the Tools menu, select Declick Out All Regions. This will create a tiny fade out at the end of every slice to improve sample playback. This can remove clicks and pops when samples are sliced between zero crossings, and most importantly, clean up transients. Let's talk about the global controls and macros in Slicex. Master level controls the final output volume from Slicex. Master randomness level adjusts global randomness when using the random mapping. LFO scales the global amplitude of all LFOs, and master pitch changes the pitch of all slices. Like many FL Studio plugins, Slicex has an XY modulation pad. Click and drag here to move linked X and Y controls. This can be used to control many parameters at once. Smooth will smooth the modulation for X and Y. Finally, you can also automate X and Y knobs directly here. In Slicex, you can layer multiple regions in decks A and B, according to the layering options from the Options menu. To create a layer, assign more than one region to the same trigger note. Normally, deck B, the lower deck, continues on from the highest note in deck A. So these regions can come from within the same deck, between decks, or simultaneously from both decks, simply from note assignment to regions. This menu has all the different layering modes available. All. When more than one region is assigned to the same note, all will play. All gain compensated works the same way, with the total output volume attenuated so that two slice regions don't sound louder than one. Velocity mapped. Velocity values are used to crossfade between co-assigned slice regions using the crossfade method set below the layering menu. Modulation X and Y mapped uses X and Y modulation values to crossfade between co-assigned slice regions. Random will use the random mapping value to crossfade between regions. Cycle will alternate between slice regions assigned to the same note. Song time synced selects the slice region that is closest to the current tempo. When the same deck switch is off, if slice regions from deck A and B are layered, both will play. If the same deck switch is on and notes are received from an even note color, co-assigned regions of deck A will be layered exclusively. If notes are received from an odd note color, only deck B regions will be played. The crossfade icons change how layered regions are mixed. None instantly switches from one to another layered region. Linear crossfades layers linearly. Balanced uses an S-curve to crossfade. Unbalanced crossfades to subsequent layers but very rapidly. Adding is like unbalanced but with an S-curve. The options menu houses macros and general settings. Assign both decks to whole keyboard assigns slices on decks A and B side by side on the keyboard. Assign both decks to black and white notes assigns slices on deck A to white notes and those on deck B to black notes. Layer both decks in parallel here. Regions of deck A are layered with the corresponding same number regions of deck B. Layer selections in both decks assigns the selection in both decks to the same note. Layer homonymous regions layers regions with the same name. Assign deck A regions to Articulator 1 assigns all regions in deck A to Articulator 1. Assign deck B regions to Articulator 2 assigns all regions in deck B to Articulator 2. Normalize layered region levels normalizes the volume of layered regions. Sample start covers whole length. When this is off, the sample start mapping articulator here covers 100 milliseconds. When on, it uses the complete length of the region. Link velocity to volume is self-explanatory. Velocity is linked to volume. Loop half of regions creates a loop in the last half of regions. HQ envelopes increases all modulation accuracy. Lock audio data can prevent edits to the audio. And finally, leave unedited audio data on disk. By default, Slicex saves in monolithic format, meaning the audio files in the patch are saved along with the preset. This means it will add to the project file size. Turn this on to stream the audio from a drive instead and keep the project file size smaller. Use the keyboard to preview and assign sliced regions to notes. This display simulates a piano keyboard using step sequencer-like pads in the place of keys. The region to key assignments set here affect how Slicex will respond to external note input also. On the lower left side are a series of switches starting at C0 to F3. These will determine the lowest key on the preview keyboard. Left-click a key to preview. Right-click a key to open Assign options. Assign current region to this key. Assigns the selected region in the region settings to this key. Select region assigned to this key selects the region assigned to this key. You can also use this method to layer regions by assigning more than one region to the same key.
It's time to quit while we're ahead. It's time.
When you drag a vocal into Slicex, you can quickly chop it using the grid-based slicing and play along to your tune.
It's time. It's time.
When you have a sample containing instruments, you can use Slicex to skip through it in the style of old hardware samplers. Very useful for lo-fi beats. What works for instruments works even better for drums. Here is a little example using this loop. Ever wanted to have something sound like it's been time stretched in 1994? Well, here's how you do that in Slicex. Load a sample,
Vocal sample.
grid slice it extremely tightly,
Vocal sample.
and then select all the notes in the piano roll. Click and drag here to stretch the notes.
Vocal sample.
Classic. And that's all you really need to know about Slicex to get started using it in your productions. We hope this video made things a little clearer and uncovered some features you weren't aware of. Happy music making!